If I am out of breath, I just had, we were in L.A. and I just had the weirdest experience. I just was backstage. I met two 13-year-old boys. I'm really shaken up about this because one was not Steve Garvey's child, and the other had never dated Cher. And wow, they're probably tourists. Anyhow, we have a fabulous show for you today coming up. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And who better to talk about it than one of the founding fathers of rock and roll, Little Richard. Then, Jackie Collins with the steamy, sizzling backstage side of today's rock scene. And finally, a topic I've been anxious to cover ever since I started the show. What's it like when a loved one and a family member takes his own life, huh? Well, today we're going to talk about suicide with Mariette Hartley. So stay with us.
All this week from Hollywood, Joan Rivers.
I feel like a fool. Isn't it nice? It's not mine. Thank you. No, the outfit is not mine. It's from Barney's. My first guest today has been called the originator, the emancipator, and the architect of rock and roll, with hits like Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, Rip It Up, Lucille, and Good Golly Miss Molly. He became a rock and roll legend. Will you please welcome the very talented and always outrageous Little Richard.
I love you.
Have nice. Come sit. Good to see you. Now, were you the originator, the emancipator, or the architect of rock and roll?
I was all three. Before me, that was nothing.
I know there was
Toilet
nothing.
paper. Shut up.
Now, whose idea? Because you're very toned down, but even toned down, there's still a real Little Richard look.
Yes.
Who figured out? You were so outrageous. The first time I saw you, I said, don't take, what's that? You know, who's that? What's that? Because you wore, go ahead.
I wore everything. I wore my mother's curtains, the sheets, the pillowcase, whatever. I just wanted to be famous, and coming from a little town in Macon, Georgia, my mother had 12 children, and I was the third child, and I just wanted some attention. And I decided that I put on some makeup on my face. My dad liked to kill me. I decided that I would just take I would take my mother's dresses and just put them all around my shoulders and make shows. I was beautiful though.
Oh, I know.
Very gorgeous.
But you were the first to do that.
I was the first.
Prince dresses up.
That's right.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
You know, Prince really looked like I used to look, exactly. But he really, hate to admit it, Prince! I wore purple first, darling. And lavender.
What was the most outrageous thing you ever wore on stage? Do you remember?
Yes.
Or your favorite?
My favorite outfit was in Vegas when I used to work with Ann Margaret and I had a gold outfit that I wore, green and gold shoes, and I walked on a green and gold carpet, and the bodyguards would lift me out of the car. I love that. And then Liberace started doing it right after that. Yeah.
Do you miss that? You're so toned
yes,
down.
I miss it because I still like to look good. You know, as I get older, I really want to look good.
Yeah,
When I get up in the morning and see something over here and something down there, I get mad. Yes.
Have you fixed yourself yet? Have you?
I'm planning on. I'm trying to find the man that Michael had. I can't find him. The one that Michael Jackson used.
Oh, Dr. Hoffman.
Oh, that's him?
Yeah, speak to me later.
Oh, my God. Woo!
Now, you also did something very brave, because I'm such a fan. You were the first performer, I think, ever to come out and say, I am a homosexual.
Yes, and everybody got mad with me for saying that. You know, I didn't mind telling the world that I was gay. I was gay. And it's nice to be happy.
It sure is.
I was happy, and I wanted the world to know that I was happy. And I wasn't ashamed. I had been that way all my life, and I didn't know nothing else but that. And so I told everybody that I am gay. I am the originator. I think I was the first one of them, too. And I found out later, Joan, that God made Adam to be with Eve, not Steve, so I had to cut back. Oh, woo!
Could you cut back? Did you really just say that's enough with boys?
Yes,
Hello,
I got tired of them boys. I got tired. Aren't you all tired of them too?
Well,
I got tired of them, and I said I'm gonna let them go. I ain't gonna do it no more, and that's for sure.
do you do it with anybody now? We can talk. No, well, you know what I'm saying.
Well, Joan,
do you have a sex life? I don't. So you can confess
well, I'm
to
gonna
me.
be your partner. I don't have. I haven't done nothing in so long. The Coasters had out a record called "Ain't Nothing to Me." I said that's my title. I am done it. I used to do it. I am done it. It's been a long time since I had it. Oh boy. I like this.
Let me ask you. We're sitting here now, and you look so good. Someone told me, because I heard that you made so much money in rock and roll, because you were the first in all those hits, one after the other. Play a little bit of a couple of the hits, just a little bit. You started a piano, they hear your music, they go crazy. America knows your music.
Yes.
Did you come out of this a very rich man?
No, I didn't.
See, that kills me.
Oh, I saw all my friends on the hill, and I was still in the valley. And it bothered me. You know, Joan, you know what really gets me? When I see all of these groups going around today calling themselves the Drifters, the Platters, the Coasters, and there's no originals in the group.
Right, because you're the...
And yes, and myself, when I see Mick Jagger touring, you know, the Rolling Stones. I love Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. They did their first tour with me in England. Mick used to sleep on the floor in my place. And I'm serious, like the Beatles used to stay with me. Jimi Hendrix was my guitarist. And when I see them making $1 million a night, and you can't even get 5,000 a night, it bothers you. And they can't sing no better than you. And can't play no better. In fact, you may can beat them singing. And you're not conceited about it either. You're convinced, you know. But let me clear this. I am glad to see Mick Jagger tour. Now, I love the Rolling Stones. I want to clear this. And to see them tour, it means that the music is back.
Now.
And I'm glad now I know how to act. And that's a fact.
The music is back.
Yes.
Play a favorite of yours.
Don't go away. When we return, blockbuster author Jackie Collins will join Joan and Little Richard.
We are back with Little Richard. Now, we were talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and there's no one that's been more privy to the wild and steamy side of that world than my next guest. Her phenomenally successful bestsellers, from Hollywood Wives to her latest rock star, have made her as famous as the movers and the shakers who she writes about. Will you please welcome Jackie Collins?
Hi, gorgeous. Hi, baby. Good to see you. Hi.
Now, in order to get your research on your book, Rockstar,
Yeah.
you spent lots of time, like a year backstage, investigating all these things.
I didn't leave my house. I just called up Little Richard and I said, tell me everything. This man is the king of rock and roll. He knows everything. He knows everything. No, I did. I was out on the road. I went out with a rock group. It was wild goings on. But you know something? I'm sure that the goings on today are not as wild as they were in your day, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to know what happened when the Rolling Stones slept on his floor.
And where did he put his lips?
In the drawer. In the drawer.
Was there more camaraderie in those days because they were younger and they were all starting in a
I don't
newer
know, you know,
industry?
I've been around rock and roll all my life because my husband had discotheques in London. He had a place called the Ad Lib, where the Rolling Stones and the Beatles all used to hang out in the 60s. And I kind of watched them grow and watched what happened, and it seemed to me to be much more exciting then. I mean, today you've got these young groups, and this is the group that I went out with. They're one of the young, hot groups. And they're they're not having the fun that used to go on because they're not really scared of AIDS, but they're thinking about it. And they've got, they used to have so many colored Smarties. You know, these are chocolates. They would say, I want 6 bottles of a scotch and a certain scotch and 10 boxes of Smarties. Now they have boxes of condoms delivered to the dressing room. Different colors.
Very different colors,
Yeah.
all right. Because in your day, was there a lot of sex going on?
Oh, yes. Oh, we night and day, all night. We had it all the time. It was all, we had some of it locked up and some we kept loose.
Did you have groupies?
Oh, we had groupies and quartets and duets, and it was all there, Joan. And we knocked it to the ground. Sometimes they didn't make a sound. It was good.
You know, let me
It
tell
was
you
really
something.
good. My big toe shot up in my boot. Excuse me, Jack.
Yeah.
It was good.
I was going to say, if I wrote about all the sex that he'd had, I mean, I'd still be writing today, and when I'm 95, I'd still be writing. But it's funny because the critics go, oh, you know, this book is so full of sex, and this doesn't all go on. Of course it goes on.
Of course it goes
I
on.
tone it down to make it kind of readable so that people can kind of get an idea what goes on in the world of rock and roll, but it's not the real truth, because the real truth you wouldn't believe.
But now, what do you mean you wouldn't believe? Give me an example of what we wouldn't believe. Give us one story, and we'll decide whether or not we believe it.
Well, I can give you the audience wants a story, right?
What wouldn't we believe?
Well, I'll give you a Hollywood story,
Okay.
okay? There's this very famous studio head in Hollywood, and he goes out with this beautiful actress, and they were going to get married, but there was a glass top table involved, and I'm not going to tell you what went on under the glass top table or on top of it.
What
but
was on
trust
top
me,
and what
if
was on
I
the bottom?
wrote it, you wouldn't believe it.
And so she decided not to marry him?
She decided not to marry him because he had this other little habit of standing in a closet that had a one-way mirror that you could look through, and he would put on a blue sequin dress and watch and ask her to have other guys in. And I mean, you know, these stories are true, and you think, I can't write this because it's going to be too bizarre.
Now, let me ask you, is that just happening in our town, or does that happen in Wichita, Kansas, but we just don't know what's happening?
Sure, it's going on in Wichita, Kansas.
I mean, those things, you
no,
know what I
I was
mean?
in a
In
stall.
Wichita, they do it on the farm.
Behind
the barn.
Does more happen here just because the
I
people are better
think that-
looking
I
and
think
it's
in
more
Hollywood
accessible?
there's a lot of great-looking people, and I've always said that it's very difficult to have a faithful marriage here because you take a great-looking movie star, and he's married to a great-looking movie star, and then they go off on location. Now, if that wife doesn't go with the guy, or if that girl doesn't go with the rock star on the trip with him, there's going to be so many other women available, the temptations are too much to take.
Do you think any star marriage, if they're two comparable stars,
Yeah.
could work?
I think it's very, very tough, Joan, because there's always that one career that is going up while the other is kind of on the slide, and there's a jealousy that happens that doesn't happen in a normal marriage.
So I shouldn't send Melanie and Don Johnson a wedding
I'm
gift.
sure that
Save your money.
they're the exception. I'm sure they're the exception. But you know, you look at it, you see some marriages that go on in Hollywood, and you know this, you read the papers,
Yes,
and you
yes.
go, hey, I can take money on this. Because you know it's not going to work out. Relationships and marriages are very, very tough.
Now, you've been married happily for how many years?
I've been married for 22 years.
And how many are happily? That's an old stupid joke. How do you know about all these sexual practices that are going on?
Well, as I told you, I call up little Richard every morning. I say, honey, what's going on?
Well, I've done a lot of them, and I believe Jackie has too.
You know, I always say, Joan, you should know this. There's life before marriage, there's life after marriage, and there's life during marriage, I hope.
Now, life before marriage, you were wild.
Oh, I was wild.
You were expelled from school.
I was
was
expelled
pretty.
from school.
Oh,
I was
Still
15 when I
pretty.
first came to Hollywood. And I mean, it's great to be a writer and to have done everything you've written about. Or if you haven't done it, you've heard about it. You know, because you have to write about subjects you know. And I have letters from people all the time saying, I want to be a writer. What do I do? I say, write about your life. But you better have had an exciting life if you're going to do that.
Tell them how you got expelled out of school, what you did.
Oh, well.
It's hysterical.
We used to go to the park every day, and I was at an English girls' school, and we were all dressed in our little school uniforms, and there would be this guy sitting on a bench flashing every time we went past. And I would wave at him and say, hi, it's a cold day today, isn't it? And they thought that was terrible. And then I used to go to the ladies' room and change into normal clothes and go and see movies all day. I didn't like school. It didn't fire my imagination.
Were you a good writer even in school?
Oh, yeah. I used to sell pages of my diary. You know, I would write out these little stories with a little few four-letter words, and I'd say, this is great. And they'd say, oh, can I buy this? You know, and they'd pay a few cents and read it, and they loved that.
So you knew from the beginning you were going to be a writer?
I knew I was going to be a writer.
Did
That's what
you
I always
know
wanted to do.
you were going to be a performer?
Yes, because I was different, and everybody in my house wanted to be a doctor, a lawyer, a school teacher, and I wanted to be a star. And my dad said that he's crazy because nobody in Macon, Georgia was a star, and I wanted the Cadillac Joan. And the only person who had a Cadillac in my hometown was the funeral home. You had to die to ride.
We'll be back in just a minute. We are back talking with Jackie Collins and Little Richard. You know, we haven't touched on it all in rock and roll. Drugs, are they still as prevalent today as they were now that we know all the consequences?
Well, I think that they are less so at the moment because I think people are more into health. You know, they're worrying about their cholesterol as opposed to doing cocaine the whole time. But, you know, there's still people that are very involved in it, and Little Richard would know better than I would.
Yes, I have a lot of friends in rock that they're still on drugs. They're
Still on drugs.
They're smoking cocaine. You know, when I was out there, we snorted it. We put it up the nose, but now they're sucking it.
And don't they realize what's going to happen to them?
Oh, yes, some of them look like bears already. And they're dying early. I have a friend of mine, he's 26, and he looks older than I do.
We have a question.
Richard, do you think you'll ever marry?
Yes, if I find somebody that really wants me, I'm ready to get married. I would like to have a little boy. Yes.
Have you ever thought of a slightly older woman who could make you laugh?
Yes, I would like to have an older woman because she would understand that I'm older too.
Oh, can we talk, sweetheart?
Oh, God. Thank you.
We'll drive home in that Cadillac.
Oh, the one that the home had.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to know how long after you did all your research for your book that it actually took you in writing the book.
It takes me about a year to write a book. So after I had done the research, I sat down and created the characters, and it took me a year.
What are you working on now?
I'm working at a book called Lady Boss. It's a sequel to Chances and Lucky, and it's about a character I write about called Lucky Sant'Angelo, who knows how to kick people around.
Little Richard, what made you decide to go straight? Was it religion, or did you just all of a sudden decide you like women?
I found out that it feels good when it's straight. I found out that everybody appreciates you if it's straight. If it can't get straight, then you're too late. And that's not great. And I didn't want to be a fake. So I felt I had what it take. And I didn't want to, I just wanted to do what is supposed to be done. And it was religion too. I found out that God made a man for woman and woman for man. I have nothing to do with nobody's lifestyle. But it's terrible to miss this chance in life that you can have children, that you can reproduce, and when you get older, you're gonna wish you had. It's terrible just to play around and enjoy and be selfish and have a good time, and you know, when you can have a family and do what God put you here to do. And I'm just glad that I am just glad that the God of Abraham talked to me, and he let me walk through the Red Sea on dry ground, and I'm glad.
Now, speaking of children, you look so young, Jackie. What are your kids doing?
My kids go to college.
Oh,
they go to
you look
college.
great. You look
and
great
they're going to
for
be
that.
writers, I hope. Writers, and they want to direct and produce, so they're going to be the right side of the camera.
Are you worried that you brought them up in this town, that they're just going to turn to California kids?
No, because I think that you have to give yourself to your children. You have to give them the time, and you have to give them your kind of values about life, and then you hope that you let them fly by themselves.
Little Richard, who do you listen to now? Who do you like musically, and who do you hate?
Oh my God! I like Michael. I like Prince. I like Bruce Springsteen. I like Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. I like Gladys Knight and the Pips. I still like the Temptations.
Who don't you like? Or don't understand? Or think they shouldn't be there? Maybe that's a nice way to put it.
I better hush.
What about the lyrics? Like you talk about now, you know, God and everything else. Some of the lyrics, like Prince's lyrics, are very, very sexual.
I think that we have to remember that the Bible is full of sex too, you know, but it says it in the right way. It tells the story of different lifestyles, of different patriots and different people. I think that Prince is truthful. He's doing what he feels. I like him because he's not ashamed. He's uninhibited. And he says what he means. You know, he's not pretending. There are so many artists today that use the beautiful words, the clean lyrics, as they call them. And behind the door, they do everything, you know, so it's just best. I think it's better to be for real. If you live the life, you pay the price. If you don't, leave it alone. Just be for real. I've been truthful all my life. Sometimes I've been too truthful.
Like today.
Little Richard, I wanted to know how long you actually been in show business.
All my life, over 40 years.
How old are you?
56.
Are you really? You look fabulous. And Jackie?
But she's younger than I am.
Jackie, we know that you're about 32, so we're not even going to say
She was a little girl when I used to go to England.
Being here, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Coming up next, Marriott Hartley.
No one reacts well to the death of a loved one. However, when the death occurs from natural causes, we eventually learn to accept it and we try to move on as best we can. But when the death is not a natural death, and it's someone you love and they kill themselves, the pain that's there for those left behind is something very, very hard to bear. Family and friends are left with so many unanswered questions, the biggest, of course, being why. Marriott Hartley has been asking why for the last 25 years. In July of 1963, Marriott and her mother were having brunch in their kitchen when they heard a loud gunshot from the bedroom. Marriott knew immediately what had happened. Will you please welcome Marriott Hartley?
Hi, darling. Oh, I think we have the same earrings.
I start to talk about it. I say, I can do this. And then I go, why am I doing this? But I'm doing this because people have to know how to get help.
Well, that's
That's,
certainly become my journey. I think, I mean, you could knock me over with a feather. 25 years ago, if someone had told me then that I would be speaking about this all over the country and that it would be a part of my healing process, that I indeed would be giving my own pain meaning, I would like to ask a question. How many people here have had a loved one or a friend commit suicide?
Applaud, because
A lot.
see, it's much more prevalent than
A lot.
people have any idea.
And I
it used to be
think-
kept so under.
Well, because
The
I think there's a
blankets.
tremendous amount of shame attached to suicide, and that comes from years and years and years, eons of superstition and myth that's been attached to it. I mean, 150 years ago, they weren't allowed even sacred rites of burial, and they were, you know, put on the side of the road, and rocks were put on them. So I was very blessed. I have not known for 25 years where my father was, and made a lifelong search and found him finally. And my beloved husband, I was determined to have a memorial service for him, which I had never had, and I realized that closure was very important. And after the evening that you and I spent together
At a suicide prevention
at
dinner.
the suicide prevention dinner, I was able to finally bury him, and it was quite an extraordinary experience.
What do you mean by bury him? You mean psychologically bury him?
Well, no, I mean, this is going to sound very bizarre, but I found out that he was at the gun club, of all odd places.
You
I
didn't know where your father's...
I knew that he was there, but I didn't know where. So I couldn't really actually be with him and say goodbye. And I found that it was a very important part of my healing process to have that kind of closure.
What happened with your father exactly? Was he suicidal?
I never thought so. I mean, my family certainly was what they call these days, I love these new terms now, he was certainly dysfunctional, a dysfunctional family. There was not a lot of talking, there was a lot of dysfunctional behavior, and not a lot of touching, not a lot of reaching out for with real feelings. My gosh, I was 26 years old before I realized what anger was. We never talked about anger. We would do whatever we could to cover it and to hide it and to push it down, but we never could label the feelings. And
Your father just got up one morning, as far as you
he
knew.
was very depressed. He was catatonic. And I remember one time I literally got on my knees and begged him to get some help and go into therapy, and he was really gone by then. And I think the devastating thing, and the very important thing for me, a lot of people who experience suicide experience it far away. I was, in many ways, and this is odd to say, but lucky enough to be there, in the sense that it was no longer I knew that it had happened. Let me put it that way.
It happened in the very next room. He went in and took a
Yes.
gun.
And he wasn't, unfortunately, he wasn't dead at the time. I kind of took over. My mother was in, obviously, a state of shock. And I'm a big caretaker, which is something I've had to deal with over the. So I called the paramedics. I ran out. I still go on Sunset Boulevard in Barrington. I can still hear my screams, you know. And it's still a part of me. I think one of the things about grieving is that it never really leaves. And
Did he leave a note?
no. He left a tiny little note, actually, a tiny note, I remember, in his pajamas. And the last I ever saw of him when
What did it say?
Oh, something about an insurance policy for like $1,000 that was in our name. And I found out since I've been writing my book that he died actually the day that Hemingway shot himself.
Same thing.
So I think it was a very conscious thing in that sense.
Did you and your mother have guilt? I mean, you're in the next room and somebody goes
Oh, yes, sure.
and you say, maybe if I'd walked in the room 4 minutes before.
Well, you know the answer to that.
Oh,
You were
well.
far away from Edgar. And I think that I think one of the problems with,
You think I think in my case it was one more phone call. I'd
Sure.
spoken to him, he was coming home the next day. And he said, I'll see you tomorrow. We were going to pick him up at the plane. And he killed himself that night. And you always think, here I go, I'm trying to be, I thought I could handle this. And my daughter, Melissa,
are handling
was
it. This
going
is
to
the way we
call
handle
him.
it.
And then she said, no, Daddy's sleeping. So she didn't want to call. And then she says, always, maybe if I had called and broken through the Do Not Disturb, that would have saved her. I mean, these terrible guilts.
and I think, first of all, I think that happens with normal death. And I think Iris will talk about that also with her son. But when you have a suicide, there's a whole other dynamic that occurs. And I think a lot of that is based on guilt. And a lot of it, again, is based on the fact that we can't talk about it because there is so much shame attached to it. Were we to blame? I mean, even when I went into therapy at the age of 23 or 24, because I knew that if I didn't get out of that house, I would die. And I remember my therapist said to me, it's a very great way of getting even with people. Now, I knew he was also trying to get me in touch with my anger, but what a heck of a thing to say. I lived with that for a long time. Get even with me for what? What did I do? And you cannot help but have that feeling. When I did Silence of the Heart, I played the mother of a child who committed suicide, and I didn't trust my own experience. I thought with my dad it would be a very different experience. It's exactly the same. And Iris, whom you'll meet later, and I have talked into the night, about it, and the feelings are exactly the same. Whether you're a child of a parent, whether you're the wife of a husband, the husband of a wife, there is still the feeling of, what could I have done?
But there's also another feeling, which I want to come back and talk about, anger. I was so angry at my husband. I went in one night, and I opened his medicine chest. I think the man had killed himself 4 days before. And I said, what did you do to us? And I took everything, because his medicine chest I was never allowed to go near. And he had used pills, as a matter of fact, to kill himself. And I went into the medicine chest at 4 in the morning and took every jar of pills and smashed it on the floor of the bathroom. And I thought, I love my husband. I miss my husband. I was so angry. It was like, you son of a bitch, you son of a bitch. It's such anger, which I want to talk about. We'll be back. We're going to meet a woman whose son committed suicide. So if you're going anyplace, don't. We are back. We have just heard the tragedies of a father and a husband taking their lives. But if there's anything worse, I think it's for a parent to face the deliberate death of their child. How does he or she go on? On February 19, 1977, Iris Bolton returned home from shopping to find distraught neighbors standing in her driveway. She was told that her 20-year-old son, Mitch, had shot and killed himself. With those words, her life would never be the same. Will you please welcome Iris Bolton? What happened with Mitch? Did you have any idea that he was this upset?
Well, his girlfriend had broken up with him 3 weeks prior to this, and so we knew that his grief was normal. But that somehow masked, I think, a deeper depression that we missed. Even though, we were with him and knew he was sad, he was an artist in a sense. He played the piano, he wrote beautiful music, and he would sit at the piano and tears would stream down his face. But I thought it was the loss of his girlfriend.
Have there been any previous suicide attempts?
No, not at all. He once a year before that had said to me that he was in so much pain that he didn't think he could go on living, but he didn't want to die either. And we got him professional help, and he only went 6 times and wouldn't go back. So we don't know how deep the depression was at that time.
Like with Mariette, there were no signs. With me, looking back at my husband Edgar, there were signs all over the place. I just didn't see them. What are the kind of things somebody can look for? Is there such a thing?
Well, now I know, yes, there are signs, a change in behavior, not eating or eating too much, not sleeping, sleeping too much, giving things away, saying goodbye to somebody else, making a will. And really, in a sense, Mitch had done some of those things. He was withdrawing. He was staying awake a lot at night. He changed behavior. The night before he died, he bought everybody ice cream. Now, he'd never done that before. We had a wonderful time together. And then I followed him down the stairs because there was a look in his eyes that scared me. And I followed him down and I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "No worse than any other night." And I thought because he was grieving about the breakup of his girlfriend.
Did he leave a note?
He did leave a note, we believe. It was found sometime later, but it didn't explain anything. It was just his pain of the girlfriend and I guess just life and the confusion of life and his own personhood.
Do you think a note makes it easier or harder? Was it easy for you or didn't mean anything either way?
Well, it's odd. This wasn't the only suicide attempt in my life, and my mother attempted about 2 weeks after that, which I never talk about.
After your father?
After my father in the same house. And I remember being at a party and coming home, and I saw the note on the desk, and it absolutely blew me against a wall. I can't describe the feeling of that note. But I don't know that it makes it any better or any worse. It clarifies it maybe, but the act has been done, and the act is what one has to deal with.
And we were talking about the anger. I was so angry at my husband, as I said, you were angry with your dad. Finally,
it was very hard for me to get to my anger.
It was
Iris
hard.
has a wonderful story about her anger, about
were
on
you
the
angry?
boat.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get angry. I was mostly guilty and wanting to know why. Why would this talented, attractive boy do this? It took me time to get angry. And I did get some therapy as well. I was in counseling. And my therapist said, you know, feel the guilt, wallow in it until you're ready to give it up, and then feel the anger when it comes. But it took me a long time. And one day I was on the lake. We have a cabin on a lake in Georgia. And I remember hearing a scream. I was driving the boat as fast as I could. That was my therapy, wind in my face. And I looked up and heard the scream. And then I realized it was coming out of me. And then I thought, what will people think? And then I thought, no, they can't hear over the motor. So I went right on down the lake, full speed, screaming at the top of my voices, turned the boat around when I got there, exhausted, looked back up the lake, and 50 people had come out on their docks all the way down the lake.
See,
So
I'd
a
like
foolish
to
feeling.
share a little bit about mine. I didn't realize until last year when I went into therapy in New York that I was also struggling with something called post-traumatic stress syndrome, which had never really occurred to me. And it's happening now obviously with Vietnam vets. And what they're doing now is taking the Vietnam vets back into the trenches. And I was speaking one day in front of like 800 doctors and psychologists at Harvard Medical, and there was a scream caught in my throat. And I realized I better get to my therapist and get to that. And for 2 hours, I went back into the trenches with him. I went through the entire scene, the sobs that came out, and this was just last year. So there's layer upon layer that we get
like
to.
an onion, and it just peels off a little at a time.
We
But it
discover and
takes
discard.
time. It takes
Yeah.
a long, long time to heal.
And a
as-
lot
as
of
you
times
know.
it takes just being with people. I had no idea there were people out there who had seen the same scenes, had smelled the same smells, who had
well, you
cleaned the
found
same
your
sheets.
father, which we didn't go into.
Yeah,
but
I found, oh, sure.
you went in,
he's-
I mean, you literally saw your father right afterward, which is...
Yeah, and then you come back and you clean the apartment up, and that's really wonderful.
We'll be back after this commercial in just a minute, so stay with us. We're back talking with Mariette Hartley and Iris Bolton, who's written a book, by the way, called My Son, A Guide to Healing After Death, Loss, or Suicide. And we have a question in the audience.
It's just 3 months since my brother committed suicide. At this point, I am so angry at him. If he were here, I think I'd be tempted to kill him. Is this a normal thing? Will it pass?
That's very normal, and it will pass. It's a very natural, normal thing, and I'm glad you said it out loud. That helps to tell
Thank
the
you
story.
very much.
Yes.
But I still get very angry at my husband. I'm back on the Fox lot. And last time we were here, we were fired, and they took his job away from him. And now we're coming back with a successful show, and I go in the car in the morning and go, Edgar, why aren't you here to enjoy this? So there's still anger all the time.
If you keep it inside, you'll explode. It's good to talk about it, write about it, express it.
And good to have people to talk to be in
Absolutely.
support groups. I think that's terribly
Yes,
important.
there are support groups all over the country that are suicide survivors support groups. And we are survivors. That's what we have to be.
The next gentleman.
Yes, I was just wondering, Joan, do you feel like it's your fault or that, you're to blame?
Well, we know we're not to blame, and we know that they're going to, if they really want to kill themselves, unfortunately, at one point, if you're not there, they're going to do it. But you never say, if I hadn't walked that extra step. No matter how much we sit here and say you don't. Yes, of course, I still say, what else could I have done?
But
Which
it
I
was-
know is wrong.
No, it's
There's
not
no wrong.
right.
There's no wrong
That's
about
the point about all of this, is that there's no right or wrong. I mean, when you say, I think I can handle it, you are handling it. And you're handling it the only way that you really can now, which is to cry when you feel like crying, to laugh when you feel like laughing, to get angry when you feel like... We are so full of principles, I mean, even if Iris, screaming in the middle of a lake, says someone's going to hear me, I mean, my gosh, that's the one thing we need to learn as we get over this, is that our feelings are our feelings, and they're going to happen whether you're standing on a street corner and somebody walks by, in my case, with a red and black check shirt. That's when it hits me, or a pipe. How do you like that, right? And they start to come, and you say, okay, here you are. I mean, embrace the grief, because as Iris so rightly says, they're remnants now. They really are remnants, but they're very much a part of my life.
You never get over it, but you do survive it.
Survivor. What about with your children, the copycat syndrome? Here, and it happened in your family. Your father killed himself, and your mother tried to kill herself.
But I think that's a very natural part of the
Yes.
grieving process.
I was so
certainly
worried about
learned that.
Melissa. I thought my daughter My daughter's going to be so depressed not handle it.
It becomes a role model of how to solve problems, and it isn't the right way to solve problems. They get down to two choices, to live with the pain or to die. And what they need to know is that there are other options other than ending your life. Yes. It's very important.
Which is another reason why support groups are important, because, boy, I tell you, you see survivors in the support groups. They're really wonderful.
The next question, yes.
I have a very good friend who was very close to his dad when he was about 5 years old, and they traveled an awful lot together. And his dad committed suicide. And so I asked, had you ever decided to seek out help and get therapy? And he said no, and he's in his 30s. And I just somehow feel in the back of my mind, I could be wrong, but I think this would help him a whole lot.
You're not wrong, by the way.
He just seems to be so unhappy sometimes and so uptight. And
it never leaves you, and you do need to get help. I don't care. It's not anything you learn how to... Did you learn how to be a parent? I mean, I didn't learn how to be a parent. So how do you learn how to deal with these experiences? It has to come from people like us who are teachers in the sense that we've been through it after various years and after all of our experiences, to be able to say, gee, that's how you get through that. Oh, that's what that is. Half the time you don't even know what the feelings are.
Exactly right.
You have to have somebody there mirroring you saying, do you think this could be anger? Do you think you could be upset? You know?
So then I should suggest that he does have that therapy or go see
bet.
a therapist?
But people don't go unless they want to go. That's the tragedy of it.
Either that or a support group.
Support group, yes.
Joan, I'd like to ask, does it hurt you to talk about it here?
Oh, I didn't think it would. Of course. It's, but if you don't talk about it, as you say, there are other people out there, you just say, you're not alone. And that's the whole point of this whole segment today. You're not alone.
And we don't have to be ashamed that this happened to us, even though in our grandiosity we feel guilt. It is not our choice, it was their choice. If it was our choice, they'd be here today.
Is there any advice we can give to people in general who have lost somebody?
I think to know that there's no timetable, everybody does it differently. There's no right or wrong to the grieving process. That connect with other people who've been there, learn from them. The American Association of Suicidology has support groups all over this country. And if you can get some therapy too, for some people, it's helpful.
I used to say to my daughter, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
You bet it is.
We'll be right back. Thank you very much. I want to thank Marianne Hartley so much, and Iris Bolton. The book is called My Son, A Guide to Healing After Death, Loss, or Suicide. And where can we get this book?
It's privately published. You can get it through the Compassionate Friends organization or the American Association of Suicidology or the Link Counseling Center in Atlanta, Georgia.
Great. Thank you both
My
so much.
pleasure.
Thank you so much for watching.